Welcome, Irene. Thank you for being here on Unleashing Light. I'm so honored to have you as a guest to talk about your journey through some very difficult childhood experiences and then struggles and challenges with addiction, and then the victory of sobriety and recovery. So,
Thank
welcome.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me.
So, talk to me a little bit about what pieces in your childhood, of course, that you're comfortable sharing, and just give us a little insight to what kind of led to that addiction for you.
Sure. So, just starting as a young child, I think living in a lot of fear. I had parents that had mental illness, and we're talking in the early 60s, where they didn't really know and couldn't really do anything. My dad was from Russia, so they were all involved in the Russian mafia back in Coney Island. I grew up in Brooklyn. Not my dad so much as my dad was a printer and they wanted him to make money. Other relatives were shot, killed, witnessed, relocated, but subsequently, they were always scared. So if somebody was hurt in Brighton Beach, then for me it would be like they would stick me in a closet, put me in there in the dark, and that would be the place I would be. So as a young child, you don't know, is that hours, minutes, a day? Like, you just don't know. So I think I started to live in a lot of fear at a very young age. By the time I was 13, I was already out of school. A lot of racism, being the only Jew in my neighborhood, swastikas spray painted on our car, on my desk, on our house.
So, what did
Um,
this look like? I mean, you mentioned being put in a closet, but what did it look like? I understand those moments specifically, but when you were in your home day to day, what did the other moments look like?
They were not good. There was no food. My mother never even put sheets down on the bed. We didn't have a pillow. And we lived in a very nice neighborhood in Brooklyn, too. You wouldn't look at the house from the front and know the damage that was going on inside. I remember one day I was so hungry that I think it might have been kindergarten or first grade. When all the kids left the cafeteria, I actually ran in there and ate every piece of crust of bread I could find and drank every drank bowl of soup. My mother had mental illness, so I remember there being a lot of cats. She would let these feral cats in our house, and you could not get them out. I was highly allergic to cats. It was just constant turmoil. My brother overdosed at 12. He was a heroin addict. So just constant turmoil, always growing
And
up.
was there ever any neighbors or teachers or anyone that knew what was going on?
Yes, I had a really good neighbor, or around the corner, my friend Joanne DeLuca, her mom wanted to adopt me. And when we went in front of the judge and I was there with my parents, I was probably 6 or 7. I was too embarrassed to say, no, I don't eat. No, I don't have clothes. No, I didn't. I could see my parents. And so the judge ruled that I'd stay with my parents. But other than that, no, there was a teacher at school in 5th grade, Mr. Tulip. My mother was so ill, she sent me to school in my tap shoes for about a year with the taps on. And this wonderful teacher, he could see that I had problems. It's like the 5th grade. He could see I had problems. And he bought me a pair of shoes so I could participate in gym. I didn't even know what underwear was. So maybe like 9 or 10 years old when someone said, "Oh, you're not wearing any." So it was just complete dysfunction. My mom had me at 44. Much later in life, my eldest brother was 17 already at that point. Um, I think she was not well, not well.
So you were just going through life, your childhood, just trying to
Yeah.
survive.
Yeah, pretty much. I was riding the train back in Brooklyn. I think at 7 or 8, my brother showed me how to get to his place in Park Slope and what trains to take. And yeah,
Mhm.
there was just no guidance. I remember having to wear open-toed shoes. One winter, my sister took those off her feet and gave them to me. People would say, oh, you're so lucky, you don't have to go home, you can stay out as late as you want. But I was the only one that could do that. So, you wind up being all alone, and you think, oh, I wish I had those parents that wanted me home and said, where are you by 7 tonight? I subsequently lived in the library.
Hmm.
It was a safe place, and it closed every night at 11. And I would just walk home. And being that I dropped out of school at such a young age, I think that's kind of why I was able to get my GED and go to college and do those things, was because I just read, always read.
Yeah, well, I'm glad the books in the library were there for
Yeah, it
you.
was refuge.
And so what age did you drop out, and how did no one know that you were missing?
Well, so 6th grade, the teacher came in and announced that I failed the test to get into junior high school, I guess middle school out here, but junior high back in Brooklyn. And with the swastikas, being Jewish, just, I mean, the boys, they would sing this song about me that I was a potbelly, wart-nosed, Brillo pad head. I just couldn't do it. A girl came to school with an ice pick, was going to stab. These are 6th graders. I couldn't do it anymore. And my mom walked in right at about beginning of 7th grade. And that's when she said she was leaving. I just thought to go shopping. I had no clue. After, I think her and my dad were married like 36 years, something like that, that she was just going. And she left, and that was it. I
And
felt
you
it.
were just in the home all by yourself?
Yep, my dad came home, said, "Where's mom?" I told him, moved to Arkansas, and he, was, I'm going to kill myself. Can't believe she left. And I called my sister in Arizona, and I said, you need to take me. I can't be here because, I'm not going to school. I'm not eating. He's working, etc. So yeah, I came out to Arizona, uh, 13 and a half. And then a series of quick events happened to me, a lot of different things.
Okay. So you're welcome to share or not share those things.
So when I got out here, my sister couldn't keep me because her boyfriend didn't want me. She's much older too. They got me a job working with a friend of his who was from New York, a pastor, who had kids that were a few years younger than me, and he wanted me to watch them. He would ply me with pot, alcohol, and then take advantage of me. And I told my sister. She then shot me out to California to live with my eldest brother, who then wanted me to go, try and get into high school. I didn't even get through middle school. He's like, we're going to get you in Hollywood High. You're going to do this and that. And I was too frightened at that point. So I met a guy 10 years older than me. I'm 14, and moved to Oregon with him, not really knowing. I wasn't raised with around alcohol. So I wasn't raised with alcoholic parents, and he drank. And I didn't really know. I thought it was cute. Oh, he's so nice. He's so funny when he drank. I had no clue the evil that person had in him. So from 14 to 17, I worked at an all-night Kentucky Fried Chicken drive-in. And I didn't go to school. I just worked. And one day I was trying to hold out money, and back in the 70s, the word stash was not what you use. And he said, "What is this?" And I said, "My stash." And I should not have said that. And that proceeded where he just took my head and slammed my face into a sink, and then took my head and slammed it side into a wall. And back in the 70s, they used to wear these belt buckles with horoscope signs on them, metal. And I remember standing up and grabbing the window. We were on the 2nd story, and I was going to jump. I was actually going to jump, and he slammed it shut like he knew what I was thinking. And he said, "You're not going anywhere." And he took off that belt buckle and beat me until I was seeing double. And I was able to escape, wound up in the hospital, wound up in juvie. And then when I went back into work with the raccoon eyes and swollen, my boss said, "That man is going to kill you. You're not going home. You're not going back. You're going back to Arizona." And he bought a ticket for me out of the goodness of his heart. He just bought me a ticket and sent me the following morning, and I got to come back to Arizona.
Well, that
The
was
17th.
a blessing for
Yeah.
sure. So clearly, I think it's fairly obvious that there was a lot of abuse and a lot of neglect and just a lot of being surrounded by a lot of violent activity. So, I mean, I can understand how all of that would certainly have led to the addiction yourself, but was there a pivotal point where you just went over the edge, where the alcohol took you over?
Well, for my most of my marriage, which was about 16 years, he cheated and cheated and I always accepted, and I never drank, I never did anything. But then he left me for my neighbor and my best friend. And that was hard to take. The other women I didn't know, but this was so personal to me. I packed his stuff and I just threw him out. And then I started to drink, which was something I really had never done.
And
And
was
then I would
that
take
because of the sense of betrayal? Was it everything that was building up?
it. Yeah, I didn't want to function. I couldn't cope. I had been HR director at AT&T. He talked me into quitting. So to stay home and take care of the kids, he walked out, and we were married Christmas Eve. He left me on our wedding anniversary on Christmas Eve. He proposed to her a year later on Christmas Eve. We couldn't wait till Christmas Day. I mean, so yes, at that point, my uncle, who was like a dad to me, was dying of cancer. He was in New York. I couldn't get to him. And my mom was dying of cancer as well. My dog died. My husband, or we had a very sickly son. I left him money. I said, the car is going to be repossessed. Here's a check. They come get it. Please give him the check. He decided he wanted to be not nice and let them take my car. So I have no job, no car, two sick children, 7 and 12, especially the 7-year-old, and alone and alone. And yeah, drinking and drugs, that's all I wanted to do. I did not want to feel. I had a really big hole in my heart.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, can you describe for the people watching just really what that addiction looked like for you? Like you're saying alcohol and drugs, but what did it, when you woke up in the morning to,
Uh,
whenever you went to bed, if you did, what did that?
well, it looked bad. You don't know the type of people you're hanging out with, for one. And I've been beat up by girls in their 20s that I've asked, like, please leave my house, and they refuse to do it. There's something really weird, which is crack etiquette. When people come to your home, they don't come without giving you something or buying something to then give you something. So therefore, I never had to spend a lot of money because I hung out with so many homeless people and I had a place. But it was bad. I was hanging out with very dangerous people. At one point, I called the police to kick some people out. And the next thing I know, I'm told, someone's going to come and grab me and tie me to a cactus and leave me out in the desert to be eaten. I've had, people threaten to cut my dog's throat. I'd come home, people would have taken over my place and broken in, locked me out of my own place. I think, and I had shared this, that the worst thing that ever happened to me was this girl didn't like me, who was an addict, alcoholic, and her and two other women decided to set me up to be raped by somebody who I had actually been reading the Bible with that day and had been talking about getting sober with. So when she said, Irene, if you go in the bathroom, I will give you all this crack, just hang out and talk to Jerome. I had no pride in talking to Jerome all day. And she said, here's all this crack, you rape her. And if you don't do that, you and your mother don't have a place to live anymore. And he was apologizing the whole time. And I was crying and screaming to try to get out of the bathroom. But these girls were just knocking and asking if they could watch. Nobody, like it was funny. Nobody would let me out. And I did run home when I got out, and I cut my wrists. I took, I don't know, 30 Ambien maybe. I didn't think I would wake up, but she was there the next morning, like let herself in and flicked a hit of crack on the table, telling me that's what I earned. I did the most ridiculous thing. I ran and got my son out of Rincon High School, the high school here. Um, I didn't know who to turn to. You don't have any friends when you live in that kind of world. And my son and I were always so close, but he shouldn't have seen me with my sliced wrist, and I was crying and he's like, who, mom? Who is this? Who did this? And even though he was 6'3" at that point, he's a big kid. I knew like they could stab him. I knew that they could hurt him. And I told him, don't worry, it was being taken care of. But that still wasn't enough to get for me to want to get sober. The second incident after that was me sitting in a bedroom with a bunch of liquor bottles, broken crack pipes, glass, Brillos, which you use, broken lighters to get that very last flame out. And I was wearing a Cocaine Anonymous shirt. And he just walked in and he looked at me. He looked down at the table and he looked at me, pulled on my shirt and said, it's more than just wearing it, mom. And he turned around and he walked out. And in a way, I was really glad, like that was the last time I saw him for a very long time, because I didn't want him to see me.
And that was the moment that woke you up.
Yeah, that was a lot of humiliation. I had just gotten a card with 3 years back child support on it, and I knew I would use it for drugs. So it was all the money my ex-husband owed me for never paying, for the kids, but I just gave the card back to my ex-husband. And I was just like, take it because I will spend it.
So let's go back to that moment with your son. It was that moment that woke you up. So tell me, you're telling me about the event. He saw this, he really kind of held you accountable, like, this isn't, you got to do better than this, mom. And so what was happening internally in that moment that the light just went off?
Well, my ex-husband actually made a comment. He said, how many times do you want to just kick your son in the teeth? And it was like, yeah, that's what I was doing. People say you have a choice. You do at the beginning, but when you become so entrenched in that life and you become so addicted, you really lose choice because your brain is taken over by the drugs at that point and the alcohol. And that made me think. That situation was just like, look at what I just put my kid through. How horrific, how horrible, to take him out of school, to confide adult things in him and expect adult behavior or adult, and I had nobody. And yeah, it was very wrong, but it was starting to open my eyes. Then within the year I moved, and I swore to everyone, if you get me a place across the street from AA, I will go to AA. All a lie. I just wanted to live next to the guy I liked and a drug dealer, alcoholic buddy. That was it.
So it didn't really wake you up then, even that moment with your son, because you still then.
I still went, I still did it, but it took me to another part of a neighborhood, like across town, where these people are never going to get to me and I'll only be around one person and maybe I won't do as much. And what subsequently happened is there was a girl in the courtyard looking for her heroin. And I was asked, can you help? She dropped her bagging. Now, heroin was not my drug. And I was like, yeah, sure. Long story short, she found it, shot herself up. They shot her up. And I just happened to be outside and I see two men taking this girl and throwing her on the ground outside of the apartment because they didn't want to call the police and have her dead in their place. And when they wheeled her past dead, that was like,
That was the moment.
That incident with my son had started,
Mhm.
and that was just like, whew, that could be me.
Yeah.
And I walked across the street to AA, and I never left. And that makes me want to cry because
Mm.
as of Sunday on the 13th, I had 13 years. I couldn't go. I couldn't go hours. Like I used to, people would say, "Well, you put the pipe down," and I'd look at them and go, "Are you the crack police? Like how much can I smoke?" And to think, you know, 13 years.
Well, congratulations
Thank
on
you.
13 years.
Yeah.
And so how did you get from trying to stay sober for 30 seconds to an hour to 3 hours to a day
Mm.
to a week? How did you get to 13 years?
A lot of it, well, not a lot of it, all of it, AA. Going in there, you know, the funny thing is in AA, they have something called a 13th step, which is where it's not good. That's the men approaching you. And I was always so male hungry and needed attention that in my head, I was like, woo, I'll pick up on someone. So I'm going to start going to these meetings because look at all these men. And eventually my brain started clearing. The men meant nothing. I did what I heard you should do, which was get service work, get a sponsor, a big book. Most importantly, get a higher power. They say you, and it's true, you must have some type of spiritual awakening
Mhm.
to find your sobriety. And that's what I found in AA. You're allowed to create a God of your own conception, your own understanding, which means my God can be fallible. My God can change its mind. My God can do whatever because I created my higher power. I used to think, and I'm not a God person, I am a higher power spiritual person. I used to think that God judged me like I judged myself. So therefore, you know, I'm a piece of shit for living the life I did. That is how God's looking at me. And my sponsor said to me, which seemed like a unique concept, why do you hold on to a God that hates you? Why don't you get one that likes you? You
Mhm.
can create your own higher power. And bam, I was like, that I can do, that I can get behind. So it was that spiritual experience, that spiritual awakening in AA, surrounding myself and doing what I was told, not what I wanted to do for once in my life,
Mhm.
but doing what I was told. I attended meetings 3, 4 a day, every single day, probably for the first 2 years. I
Good for you.
chaired 5 meetings a week,
Mhm.
started a big book study, and I just have continued. It's 13 years, and I still go to 5 to 10 meetings a week. I've
Good
never
for you.
stopped. Yeah.
Good for you. And so, what has been the most inner work that you've had to do? I hear, the spiritual path and I hear AA, but what really had to happen in your heart?
Well, what I had to get everything off my chest is what had to happen. And in the steps, the fourth step is we make a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. And then in step 8, we start to work out the resentments we have, but we're just looking at what our part is, not anything the other person did, because it is our part. And just starting to get it out and working with my sponsor, understanding that I was not responsible for a lot that happened to me. And many people, if they experienced what I did, might have picked up a drink or picked up a drug. I did, like I said, I had a resentment against my mother. I was able to get that lifted, and just work out those resentments, get rid of them, speak, not stuff anymore. My sponsor told me an uncomfortable no is better than a resentful yes. And I love that because I would always say yes to be a people pleaser. And I had to work on learning to say no. I had to learn to take care of myself. Should make me look at myself and say, you are loved, and I value myself. Um, Pray a lot, but mostly it's for me, it was talking and getting it out. I had to get that out. And I would say the most rewarding thing that has come out of AA is my relationship with my children and my grandchildren.
So talk a little bit about how you were able to rebuild a healthy relationship with your children.
I don't know exactly how healthy it is, but
Okay.
but I they in AA it says that we can't apologize except when we apologize except when to do so would injure them or others. Every time I would try to apologize to my children, they would say, as long as you're sober, that's all that matters. I don't want an apology. I don't want to hear it. I have to accept that. I know they still have resentments, but as long as I'm sober, that's what they care about. With my son, my relationship really, really mended well.
Good.
He still tries to be a caretaker for
Mhm.
me because that's the position I had stuck him in since he was little. And I try to tell him, sometimes I just need to speak. You don't need to solve. And I think that's a good relief for him. And with my daughter, I shared my story the other night on an international AA meeting. I asked her if she wanted to listen. She told me no,
Mhm.
closed the door. I had no idea she was listening. And the next day she started, and this is just this week, she said to me, so you almost stabbed someone, almost killed someone, Mom? And I was like, oh my gosh, she listened to my story. And we were able to have a conversation that we have not been able to have really since I've been sober.
Wow. And did you find that to be helpful?
Oh, yeah. She hugged me and was crying. I hugged her and I was crying. And she was like, Mom, I never realized what your childhood was like. I never realized you went through all this. I never realized. And she has issues herself with prescription Adderall. And I was able to finally bring that up. And one time she said to me, Mom, you don't understand. I have to take it. It's the only thing that makes me feel normal. And for anyone that's listening, I think that's the whole thing with drugs and alcohol. We think it makes us feel normal. I feel okay. This is normal. But if we knew we could live life differently, we would. No one wants to live like that. And I think she just realized a lot, and we had a breakthrough. And it was really, it was, I can't, I can't even describe it.
Well, congratulations. That's
Great.
huge. That
Yeah,
is a
it
big
was.
breakthrough. So when I had to kind of set a healthy relationship with your children and you kind of, I don't know how healthy it is, starting with your son, but both your son and your daughter,
Yeah.
if it could be 10% healthier with your son, what would need to happen in order?
He, well, I shouldn't say this. One, he would need to be a Democrat because we are at it. I
All right,
may
let me rephrase it. Let me rephrase
please, because
it.
that's the
So, if
issue.
there was one thing you could
Yeah.
do to make the relationship more healthy with your son, what would that be?
It would be what I said. I need him to be quiet, not try to problem solve, and just listen and say, okay, Mom,
Mhm.
okay. I tell him that all the time. I don't need you. I did what you shouldn't do when a child's young and said, your dad's left the home. You're the man of the house now.
Mhm.
Very bad thing to do to a young man because that always makes them feel responsible for taking care of mom.
Yeah. Okay, so I hear, Irene, like it would be helpful for you allow to be allowed to say what you need from him and for him to hear that. And
Right.
what do you think he would need from you?
Well, he's told me I need you to be happy, cheery, not always have an issue. Like this is what he's told me he needs from me. And so when I do have issues now, I try not to share them as much.
Mhm.
I try to problem solve more on my own without running to my son, which is something I've done my whole life. I mean, when he was 22, he said to me, his wife's name is Aurora. He said they've been together 13 years. He said, "My only goal in life, Mom, is to make sure you and Aurora are taken care of." He said, "If I do that and succeed, I'm going to be very happy." And he's 31, extremely successful. And he's takes care of me when I need it. But I can't be very independent if he's trying to swoop in there and save me.
And so who is responsible for saving you?
Yeah, I don't. So that's, he needs for me to ask less, and that is what I do now. I ask less.
And so it's impossible for him to save you, right? He
Yes,
doesn't have
exactly.
any control over that. The only person that has control over that is you, right?
Yeah.
And so maybe one of the things that could truly help him is for you to save you, for you to find other supports than
Mm.
him so that you can save yourself.
Yeah, it was so much better when AA meetings were in person.
Mhm,
And then I had that support. And, I still have a sponsor. She has 40 years sobriety. She's been mine since the very beginning, 13 years.
mhm,
I'm on the phone sometimes daily. It just when I need her, I know to call her. I know to ask for help. I learned at the beginning, they say that the disease of alcoholism, the word disease is the dis-ease that
correct.
you feel in yourself.
Yeah.
And it's learning to deal with that dis-ease um, that helps you deal with the disease, which helps you. And we've got the program is set up in a special way to help walk you through the steps that you need to do. And it's a lifetime program, and it is a program where you can apply these steps to every aspect of your life, not just drugs and alcohol.
Wonderful. Well, so that she is a great support for you. And so
Yeah.
that's one way, right? To just keep you going on that path.
Mhm.
And if there's one thing that could make your relationship 10% better with your daughter, what could you do in that relationship?
Keep my mothering skills to myself and keep my mouth shut.
Okay.
Because it's the little things I try to tell her, and I will look at her and say, you're 36 years old and you're alive, and you managed to have two. Just if I could just share the beautiful
Sure.
part of my 5-year-old grandson. We were
Mm,
at the pool. There was a ball we brought. I was too tired with both of them to get it. I'll go to the dollar store, get one. And this girl says, "Would you like me to get that ball for you, 10-year-old?" And as she's running to get it, he says to me, he calls me Omi. He says, "Omi, you know why she's doing that?" And I said, "Why?" He goes, "Well, because I held the door open for her. I always practice random acts of kindness." And
mm,
that makes her, this is a 5-year-old. So she's doing something
mm.
right. Like she looked at me, gave him a kiss, and she said, "How come you're so sweet?" And he just looked at her and he said, "Because I came from you, Mom." And
There's lots of angels all over the place that come in the
yeah,
most beautiful moments. Yeah.
yeah, he said, so I mean, obviously she's doing right, the right things. But so yes, keep my mouth shut, let her mother and parent,
Mhm.
and yeah, be quiet. Yeah, just be quiet, I guess.
And then what would be your advice or words of wisdom for other people struggling with addiction?
My thing with addiction is AA, and I never really drank a lot. The reason why I chose AA, so for anyone that's an addict that's listening, this was my reasoning. I had gone to an NA meeting, but I'm a drug addict basically. And all they're doing is talking about drugs. Oh, I went and relapsed last night. Wow, I really want to get high right now. And in my head, I'm like, oh, I want to get high. But I never really drank a lot of alcohol. And so AA is the original program. NA didn't come into being until 1947, and then it fizzled out for a very long time. Um, and I thought, well, I don't really drink. So if I sit in an AA meeting, I'm going to listen. When someone says, oh, I want to have a drink right now, I'm not thinking, oh, so do I. And you change, with addiction, it's like a circle. You have a spree and then you wake up and you're like, oh my God, I drank, I did this, oh, life's bad. And you've got that window of opportunity, that moment that's open for you to try and get sober and then to feel better again. It's like this, it's just a continual cycle. You got to break through that moment and not have that spree. And I suggest, if you didn't drink a lot, go to AA and in your head just substitute what they're saying. The message is the same. If you did drink, I suggest go to AA because it's the original program. And my sponsor has 40 years sobriety. She's gone to a meeting every day. She's a retired doctor, um, almost for the last 40 years. It is something you can never stop doing. When you let up on your program of action, your course of action, is when you hear people have relapsed.
Yeah.
So I will continue to do what got me sober to begin with, and I will not veer off that. My brother, just quickly, if I could say, was a heroin addict at 12. 38 years of homelessness and addiction. At 50, he got sober. By 59, he amassed a PhD and became an addiction specialist and a college professor. At
Wow.
61, he stopped going to AA, stopped going. He sounded high. We brought him out here. We found out he had cancer. They wouldn't treat him for the cancer because they were giving him pills, which would make him get loaded. And by 63, he was dead from a horrific case of cancer. What was worse, it was esophageal. So to go through a whole life like that and then have to live in your head the last year and a half, and you can't speak and you can't write because of the medicine you're on, was a very brutal death to see. So that is an example of, you can put it all together and lose it like that if you stop doing the steps and stop working the program.
Yeah. Well, I am so glad that you have gotten out of that lifestyle. I'm so glad that you have your brother's example, although it did end tragically for him. I'm glad that you have the example of what not to do and how quickly that can take you. And I am also thrilled that you have 13 years, and I hope you
Yeah.
have 13 more and then 13 more after that, and continue and continue and continue. And I send you all the prayers and blessings for your children and grandchildren and wish you wellness.
Thank you so much, Liz, for having me on today. And I hope I was able to be of service and maybe help one person out there.
I believe wholeheartedly that your story will certainly help someone.
Great.
So thank
Thank
you
you.
so much, Irene.
Okay.
And
Thank
we
you.
will be in touch soon.